And you also look at it from the point of inflation point of view, which is another macroeconomic element to use for your comparison. Your heart will also bleed.
Vincent Oke Nwachuku is an author. He once said, "Some creditors will sing blues to lure you into debt, and when you put on your dancing shoes, you'll be compelled to dance electric shock." Oh, wow. Interesting. All right, let's take the next one. And this one is from Muhammad Ali. He is an American professional boxer and activist with nickname The Greatest. He once said, "Wars of nations are fought to change maps, but wars of poverty are found to map change." Absolutely spot on. Our last quote is from Henry Ford, an American industrialist and business magnate. He was the founder of Ford Motor Company. He once said, "It is inevitable that anyone who can borrow freely to cover errors of management will borrow rather than correct the errors." Let's see how all of this goes relate to what we will be discussing today. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, has said that the government did not suspend plans to remove fuel subsidies, but has rather expanded the subsidy removal committee to include teams from the incoming administration and the state governors. Mrs. Agnes, a special advisor on media and communications, UNISA Abdullahi, made this known in a statement. So it seems as though the government is faced with a difficult choice, either to maintain the subsidy and continue to dig an unsustainable fiscal hole, or to risk potential social and economic unrest by removing it. Well, that's what I thought, but what do I know? But then you recall that the finance minister said during the presidential election, the candidates promised to remove fuel subsidy. However, considering the current administration's safety, it has been suggested that the gradual removal of fuel subsidy may commence in second quarter. That's according to the finance minister. So reactions on the long spoken about fuel subsidy removal is still pouring in, and that's one leg of our conversation for today. Plus, Nigeria's increasing debt burden, unemployment rate projected to rise at 40.6% as compared to 2022's 37.7%. We've got all of this plus more here on The Conversation with my guest, of course, Dr. Onuoha Nnachi. He is an infrastructure economist with interest in energy, urban development, and transportation infrastructure. You'll get to meet my guest after this time out. Join us again. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Let's go straight to our conversation for today. And our guest on the show today is Dr. Onuoha Nnachi. He is a financial expert and he is an infrastructure economist. It is great to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Likewise. All right, let's get down to business. Let's talk about Nigeria's economy. Now, when a lot of people we'll start with Nigeria's debt burden. When a lot of people think about Nigeria's debt burden, which stood as at December 31st, 2022, stood at 46.25 trillion naira, it does make them quiver and nervous. But personally, let me ask you, does this in any way bother you, or somehow you just feel like Nigerians are just making, because I've heard economists say that Nigerians are just making a fuss out of nothing, or something that is supposed to be a walkover, like someone's have actually told me. What's it for you?
Well, there's nothing wrong by anybody or any country owing. There's nothing wrong about it. It's part of life, it's part of business. The more you have that capacity to borrow, the more your potentials are being exploited and all that. But it becomes a problem when you begin to compare your debts to revenue ratios, your debt to GDP ratios, and all other factors being put in place. So that is where the Nigerian case becomes a concern. And you also look at it, how do you service your debt and what part of your revenue do you use to service your debt? If you begin to exceed 20%, 40% of your revenue and you use it to service debt, that is a concern. As of today, based on World Bank numbers, they say we service our debt with about 92% of our revenue. It's a critical one. And if you also look at what the Minister of Finance said is about 80% and what we use to service our debt, and then you ask for that question. Whichever of these numbers we take, either the World Bank numbers or the Minister of Finance number, you still have to see the concerns about it. But what is important for us to pay detailed attention to? How did we get here? What caused it? Is there anything we would have done different? Even if we're at this position, what can we do to take us out of it? We are not the only country that is indebted across the world. Our closest neighbor, Ghana, has the same issues. Even the Americans has the same issue. But is this economic ratios that's where the difference begin to fall in place? We also need to realize that, one, the current debt situation we find ourselves is a global one. We need to acknowledge that. And then two, we also have to pay attention to realize that this debt is coming out of three great factors that have happened globally. The world has gone on recession twice, and which took Nigeria into that deep recession twice also. We also pay attention to the COVID-19 effect, which this is the only time the economies accepted that we can have zero economics. Nothing is moving. Nobody moved from point A to goods were not shipped, nothing were shipped. And when you take these factors into being and you now realize, okay, hey, this could cause any big damage. And if you take it further, like you mentioned, 40-something trillion, with what happened yesterday, we are 78 now. 70.
Like I said, 77.
78. So that put us on a very bad shape, very, 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 very bad shape. And the part of it that is even concerned is the ways and means borrowing. If you realize during Charles Soludo period, during the consolidation of the bank, that was when the CBN Act was amended to create room for ways and means borrowing. And the Act clearly stated it, I think it's section 38, subsection 3. It clearly stated it that such should just be about 5% of your previous budget and other. And throughout Jonathan period, Yaradua period put together, their ways and means did not get up to $1 trillion. Did not get up to, there's about 890 something billion that they were able to do within their own 8 years, put together everything. And then you ask yourself, within the last 8 years, what have we been able to do? We are already at 24.3, still climbing. We don't know what will happen in the next week, but and that put us on a very, very bad shape. And when those laws were amended to create those rooms, they were considerations. The consideration was based on the CBN is the lender of the last resort. In case, it didn't say for you to use to fund lifestyle or fund salaries, and it said in case your revenue did not come on time. It is clearly stated, in case your revenue did not come on time, you expected revenue. So that expected revenue must be seen to exist before you do it. But when it comes to become a clear intrusions and violations that has occurred, and because if you look at the difference between what the Jonathan administration did and what this particular administration has did, is about 2,800 and some fractions percentage difference. So you can imagine such a number. So, like I said, one of my major concerns is not that we are indebted; is what is the way out, and that should be a concern. So.
What is the way out? We'll talk about that. I hear you talk about ways and means, which has been like a controversy over time. We'll talk about that then. But then you talked about Professor Chukuma Soludo's time, and then you're talking about now the current administration. I recall President Muhammadu Buhari, when he was giving his scorecard, he gave the fact that they have delivered on the deliverables that they promised Nigerians. So if you have to compare during the Professor Chukuma Soludo, or if you have to compare during the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's administration and now, how far so far?
From the economic indices, and it's difficult to compare, though. It's very hard. Very hard, painstakingly if you want to do it. Where do you start? If you let me just take the key macroeconomic indices, and then you begin to see. First, if I pick the foreign exchange, it's part of it, and you ask what was the ratio. Jonathan left office at 171. I'm talking about open market rates, not even the government rate. That was 171. As he was leaving, it jumped up to 200 and 201. But where are we today in the open market rate? We are 745. As of that time Jonathan was leaving, we had the CBN rate at 151. Today, our CBN rate is 461. So I really will find it difficult to compare. And you also look at it from the point of inflation point of view, which is another macroeconomic element to use for your comparison. Your heart will also bleed. I remember at the point of exit of Jonathan, let me just take it straight to food inflation, which is the one me and you will feel better. The most commonest staple food in Nigeria is bread. We used to buy bread at 250, 300 highest. But today, you're getting bread at 1,000.
1,200.
So these are clear factors that you were used to. We used to have a GDP that was running above 500. Today, we have a GDP that has fallen with over 100. So you look at those things. You look at so many factors, economic factors, that you begin to compare. You say, wow. But the case is, I always tell people, every situation is never the same. It's never the same. The people will tell you also during the Jonathan period, the crude oil rate was at this point where you used to sell crude oil in the 90s and above 100. And now, in the first 2-3 years of this government, crude oil was below $30. So we need to also put all those things into consideration. You also have to also put into consideration for the 6 years of Jonathan and 8 years of Jonathan Yaradua period, there was no COVID. So this one, we had COVID. And COVID is completely, let nobody take it out of it, what it has done to the global economy. So every part of the world is trying to come out of it. So Nigeria is not immune to it, excluded to it. But
so are you still saying that even after all these months and years since 2019, 2020, are we still grappling with the disruptions caused by COVID-19?
Yes. Clearly, first and foremost, you take it from the energy market. The energy supply chain were disrupted, clearly, during COVID. Those industrial areas, those industrial countries that were high manufacturing could not manufacture, so the energy consumption went low. And because the energy consumption went low, and we are one of those countries that depends on our sales of crude oil for revenue, so we have to pay that effect. As those countries peak in their manufacturing, so does our revenue increases. And we also did not manage internal security issues properly because we allowed our local productions to drop. Our crude oil productions were below 1 million. It's not that we're even ramping it up above 1 million and climbing. So this put together is a combined effect. The people that used to consume it from us, we are not taking. The maximum we could produce, we're not producing that. So that double effect. So as they're increasing their productions, so their demand comes for us. As we're increasing our production, this is where we are going to start balancing it. As of today, I can tell you, we have over 4 vessels in the seas carrying Nigerian crude oil, begging for who to buy. Begging for who to buy. There's no market. 4, I can tell you, no. I verified that last night.
But then I have some economists that I've talked to, and then they said it's a complete lie when the international communities tell you that in the next few years there will be no one to buy what we have to sell in the global market because of the fast rise of renewable energy?
No,
So
no,
that means you
no.
don't.
I'm not putting it on the renewable. No, renewable is not a cost. Renewable is not a cost. No, I didn't state renewable in it. I'm talking about those that had factories. They had about 10 factories and they were producing at this capacity. Because they can't produce at that capacity, the energy consumption is low. And
Okay.
because OPEC volume is also still not reduced, you still see what is going on. And the worst of it is the war between Ukraine and Russia. That has made Russian crude to be in the black market at a subsidized rate. If the OPEC is selling at this rate, and the Russian crude is being sold at a lesser rate, and it has effects. So it will affect you that want to sell at OPEC against them. So the nations, the countries that we used to supply are no longer taking that quantity from us because they are behind and doing the black market transactions. So,
Oh, wow. All right, so let's go back to Nigeria's burden and debt burden. I'm going to ask you two questions and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. Now, does it actually make economic sense to continue borrowing at this point, even as we talked about, even at 78 trillion naira? Yes, we've heard quite a number of economic think tanks who say that even countries, developed countries, advanced countries, they do borrow. So Nigeria is not the only country that's borrowing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and that's what they keep saying. But if the recent report from the World Bank, like you posited, saying that Nigeria spent about 96.3 percent of its 2022 revenue to its to service its debt, then what are your stance in that regard? That's one on the side. And then secondly, with that controversial or controversies around ways and means and how the federal government should not overrun what they did the previous year in terms of borrowing, but still, is there a limit to borrowing for a private business? I know that they have a point where they say that, okay, so far, no further. But can same actually be applied to Nigeria, whether from the federal or the state government or the local government, in terms of our public stock? I mean, like starting from the FEC to seek the approval of borrowing more.
If you got me right, what I said is borrowing is not an issue. It's the structure you have on ground. Why do you borrow? If you borrow to industrialize your nation, it means that industries will pay that debt. But if you borrow to pay salaries, where will it come back to pay from? And institutional borrowing requires a lot of scrutinizations for it to take place. But when you go to CBN for ways and means borrowing, it becomes a clear issue. It means that you cannot even borrow from institution. That's why you're falling back to this. And that shows how bad your debt is. If your debt is so good, the institutional framework organizations will be willing, very, very, their lending appetite will be very high. But because of the situation, so for me as an economist, as an investment person, I will always say, on the ways and means borrowing, we have exceeded it with over 2,000%, over 2,000. So it does not call for anybody thinking of it again. Is just insane. It's a no-brainer for that.
Oh, wow.
But if you think about institutional borrowing, face the institutional framework. If you pass it, then you can qualify for it. But you're not going to pass it with your current situation. You are not going to. It's just like the last fund that World Bank was trying to give to Nigeria, the $800 million, because it was specific. It was specific on what you're going to use it to do. Okay, if you want to remove this, we'll give you this. If you're not removing, we're not giving you.
Okay.
The conditions are clear.
Oh, okay.
That becomes the framework. If you want to remove this, we can use this to support you. But if you're not removing this, sorry, okay, this money is not for you. So you can't go. So it becomes more specific. But on the ways and means part of it, because clearly. Let me tell you one thing. When you borrow from ways and means, you are exporting inflation. because you are pumping more money than the market could. The demand and supply of the currency will play on the goods. So who pays the price? It is the consumers, it is the Nigerians, and not the system. You are gradually just exporting inflation into them. It is this ways and means borrowing. If you arithmetically check it, you now see it is proportionate. As you increase it, so does the inflation increases.
Oh, wow.
You generally see the bearing, the relationship between them. So I will not, and I will not at this point. But what is important that we should look at? Nigeria is a country that is blessed with natural resources. Can we convert our natural resources to national assets? That is a way to come out of all this. I'll give you a typical example of how we can easily do that. Today, we have over 200 trillion, about 222 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's the Europe is looking for just about 20 or 30 trillion cubic feet of gas for their survival for the next 20 years. And you have it. Hello? Are we not thinking? Can't we trade our gas? So with that gas you're trading, you're converting your natural resources to national assets. Such a trade, such an agreement, such a relationship can guarantee you a capital injections of $50 to $100 billion into your economy annually. And that way, you easily walk out of this debt.
But how about people who've been complaining about gas flaring over time?
The gas flaring is a different case. You know, when you go for crude processing, you are mining and you are drilling and together. There's bound to be gas flaring. But what the complaint is about, ability to trap those gas and convert into usables. That is one case. We are talking about gas reserve. The way you have crude reserve, that's the way you have gas reserve. The way you can say, okay, today we have about 37 billion barrels of crude in our soil that are there. We have over 220 trillion cubic feet of gas in our reserve. How much of this are we making use of? Gas is the first element of industrializations. Can't we make it? We are a country that we are suffering from power issues. How do you expect a 220 million population to be playing around 5,000 megawatt of this? In energy consumption, it is 1 megawatt per 1 million populations. So by any form, we are supposed to not be anything less than 200,000 megawatt power plant. I can give you to countries that have made that. South Africa today, just because South Africa is operating about 52,000 megawatt of power, and they have a population of about 60 million. Singapore is operating about 8,000 megawatt with a population of about 6 million. So you can see the ratios that exist. It's a standard. And you are here. You have the gas natural resources to do that. So if we can begin to convert our natural resources into national assets and create a mechanism for import substitutions, we'll begin to pick a sector of the economy and says, in this year, we are going to substitute this particular item or items from importation so that you no longer pay off the foreign currency for those items to come into Nigeria and you easily move. And it's very easy to do. And I can give you lists, as I just mentioned, gas. There are other items that you can run in that category. And that way, when the world begins to see your mechanism, okay, Germany depends on you on gas. You have signed an agreement with Germany that you're going to be supplying them this particular number of gas volume yearly at this rate. About 3 countries, Qatar signed a 20 years agreement with China for gas supply. And that earns them over 25 billion annually for the next 20 years. It's a fixed. Where are we? So it's about leadership to show the goodwill, okay. And there are so many of these mineral resources that are banned in Nigeria that you can turn around into that. And most of them has been established in commercial quantity. It's just the ability for the government to have the political willpower and the political credit to do it.
Now, when you talk about government, let's take it down to the states, because now, according to the NBS, on state profile analysis, it says that Lagos recorded the highest domestic debt in Q3 2022 with about 877 billion and Naira, followed by Delta State, and then you have Ogun State. But then the lowest debt was recorded in Jigawa State with 44 billion Naira, followed by Kebbi, and then Katsina with 60 billion, and then 62.37 billion Naira respectively. So my question here is, there are some states that normally you would have thought that they would not be anywhere around debts. Say, for instance, some people would think Lagos, states like Lagos that were doing very well at some point, that some particular administration, that they didn't even need money coming from the FAC to survive. And then you also have states like Ogun State that they're enjoying the benefits of staying close to Lagos. Then Delta, which is regarded as one of the proverbial goose that lays the golden egg. So then you begin to wonder, what are they not doing right or doing wrongly at this point?
They're doing everything right, though. Domestic debt is, let's understand our domestic debt and why some states or state governors borrow from the banks to do what they want to do. Most of the states you see that, like Lagos, Delta, Ogun, these are states that are chasing quick wins. Clearly, because domestic debt is normally attached from the Accountant General's office, an irrevocable payment order. It's more like an advance overdraft. And this is what happens. I'm a state governor. I want to do ABCD, and my revenue as of today would take me 5 years or 10 years to finish it, but I want to achieve it in 2 years.
Okay.
So
I've seen some particular state in that corner.
So I want to achieve it in 2 years. I don't need to wait for the 8 years. So I go to the bank. It's like an advancement.
Oh, okay.
And take that money. And I'll tell the bank, you see, in 8 years, be collecting this from my allocations that comes from Fed. And I'll go to the Accountant General and sign an irrevocable payment order. And I move on and begin to do what I need to do. And most of those states that does such borrowing, they do it specifically for a project, and it becomes much easier. Whether they execute that project or they divide that project funds, that's another case. That part I wouldn't like to talk about it. But the point of it, like you mentioned Delta. As of my last check, the Delta state is lower because what they inherited and what they have today is like they inherited about 90-something and they have paid it down a little. In as much as you're borrowing, you're paying down. It's a cycle. Some of them keep borrowing, they keep paying down. But the part is, like I explained to you, it's more like an advanced investment on their side. So it really helps some of them to do. Some people naturally are risk adverse, so state governor wouldn't do it, and so.
So now, for some of these states, if the Minister of Finance keeps saying that we don't have a debt problem, but then we're in a very good place to keep borrowing, but we have a revenue problem. So what are we? What should we be doing in the national, the subnationals, and then the local level to show up our revenues? What are states doing, or better ask, what should they be doing more to creatively increase their revenues if we keep screaming that Nigeria is the big brother or the giant of Africa? Why can't we just level up?
No, see, the part of the matter is our revenue issue. We are still using the manual ways of collecting revenue. First things you do in revenue, you block all the loopholes, all the leakages. And today was...
You mean with TSA?
No, not TSA. Not TSA. TSA is just one of it. There are still over 1,000 leakages.
Okay.
So the moment you set a system where these revenues are blocked completely are blocked, and the only way you can do that is through technology, and technology will just clean everything. Nobody will be fighting who collected what, whether the declaration was full or half. No, you get over that. You must get to the place where every revenue is paperless. You don't need to see me to pay it.
You don't need to go to FIRS office.
You don't need to interact with it. So those interactions is where the the revenue source begin. I'll give you a typical example. You're a company and I'm FRS. I send you a bill that you're owing to pay this. You're owing to pay 2 billion. And I still send you a letter. We're inviting you for a meeting. Abba. Can we just stop that? Can we just stop that inviting you for a meeting? If you send that bill, let the person go and pay. If he's not happy for it, hello, petition. The system will address you. But when you invite them for a meeting, it's for us to negotiate. And that negotiation is the root of the corruption. So clearly, we must come to that system where you implement it. All government generating revenues, their means of that revenue must be electronically, must fly through a technology. Are you from MPA, your customs, your FRI, or NCC? No. The moment you clean that, put up a central platform, and the president, the minister for finance, and the accountant of the country will have a tablet. Every day they can see what every quarter is contributing. You just pick your tablet and the technology will show you. So that alone will take us out of this. So saying that the revenue problem is the collection issues, and once that is addressed, but most importantly, we must begin to make investments that generate employment, investment that improve our economy, cost of living, and everything. And once we do that, it will surely get out of it. There have been so much intervention from CBN that are worthless, meaningless. I can't say the change. I can't see what they've done. Clearly. Do
you want to put a name to it? Like the Uncle Boros program, is that what you're referring to? Trader money, market money? Are you referring to them?
Yes. If I choose today to make an intervention, I'll give you a typical intervention. Today, over 60% of the furniture consumed in Nigeria are imported. I say I want to stop it. That's why I tell you, import substitution. I want to stop furniture importation in Nigeria. We already have, you can sit down and count up to 10 strong furniture local manufacturers. I want to establish you all. All of you come together and be in one village. I want to establish 10 furniture villages in Nigeria with the brands names. The import substitution will be clear, and we'll begin to see it. If you do that for them, and they are generally employment will be generated, they will pay more tax. That's what we call import substitution.
But then, sorry, I have to cut in there. They're calling us to go on a break. But before we go on that break, according to the Debt Management Office, she said, and quote, okay, let me take it from here. She said, our total public debt to GDP is about the lowest in Africa compared to countries like Kenya and Angola. Some economists also say that they have no reason to get worried. Proper use of monies and then borrowing by investing more in capital projects, create jobs, attract investors and businesses. But now, two questions again before we go on this break. And I'm going to ask you, how do you attract businesses when most of the companies are already leaving Nigeria and the major complaint is with regards to electricity? How then do you deal? That's one on the side. And secondly, the special advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on media and publicity, Femi Adesina, has recently said that it is not the responsibility of the government to create jobs. So how do you mesh all of this then?
Please, I don't want to join issue with Adesina. It's just something else. If it's not government responsibility to create a job, whose responsibility it is to create a job? I just don't understand that. If government cannot provide the enabling environment, the enabling infrastructures for jobs to be created, who will do it? So that statement, I just laughed over when I saw it. Bring you back to what the debt management said. She is talking about debt to GDP. Can you tell us debt to revenue? No, because it's not realistic. Remember what GDP is all about. It's all about the per capita income of the total population. But if that per capita, the people are just surviving and existing, and the national revenue of the country does not show that, yes, you can service this debt. Every debt you have, you services. There's an interest in it, there's a compound part of it. So If your revenue cannot service your debt, and you're telling me, oh, because your debt to GDP is still okay, you don't know how those people are surviving. They may be surviving out of some circumstances. So you don't use that to judge. Yes, it counts, but it's not. You don't take it in isolations. It must be taken. You must put GDP, you must put revenue, you must put inflation, you must put exchange rates. These 4 or 5 macroeconomic elements must be put in place. You don't just single out one. That one may be insignificant at that point in time that you're judging that thing. So it doesn't really make sense. So you should talk to the novice in the industries or the kindergartens or rookies. But in realities, we know what it does to us. So I will leave that matter on that. One, I said, you don't treat it in isolation. Let's treat it together. It's just like when we talk about over 130 million in Nigeria, multidimensionally poor. It is various factors. Some are poor because of sanitation, some are poor because of water. So when you put it together, you begin to see the compound effects, and so.
We're going to definitely come back to that where you just landed. Let's go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation with Dr. Onuoha Nnachi. I will see you after this time out. Join us again.
Anybody thinking, oh, we're not generating enough, it's not our problem yet. As far as we can generate and take it to the homes, we are good. Now, if this transmission is now improved, where you can generate, the transmission line can carry up to that 15,000, 20,000, our power will actually improve. If we're using just 5,000 or below 5,000, and we are where we are today, think about where you have additional 10 on top of it. So you should tell the multiplier effect.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you actually just joined us, you missed out on a whole lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. As our guest on the show today is Dr. Onuoha Nnachi. He is an infrastructure economist and a financial analyst. All right, before we went on that break, we've actually made quite a number of salient points. But then, because you talked about unemployment in Nigeria, from there talking about the unemployment rate, which was projected to rise to 40.6% as compared to 2022's 37.7%. And looking at the SDG goals, that's goal number 8 to be precise, that speaks about promoting sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all in 2030. How do we get there as a country when 2030 is just less than 10 years from now?
Well, impossibility does not exist in my dictionary. Everything is possible. It only requires extra work, more dedications, and you achieve what you want to achieve. For us to create more jobs and attain the set goals, first, we should approach it from the energy end. If we get our energy system right, more power available, it then translates to more industry, more businesses will survive. And you ask yourself, where are we in the energy sector? And that will give you a typical issues for you to be concerned about. And a typical effort needs to be made to increase our energy generations, energy consumptions that gets to the home. So if you ask me to talk to the next administration, I would say, hey, yes, there's a power sector reform that was done in 2006 and 2007. That was when the reform took place. So we need to work that backward and do a review of it. Look from our generations to our transmissions to our distributions and then see where they meet. You ask yourself today, what is the capacity we generate that gets to the homes? We are revolving around 4,000 to 5,000. And you ask yourself, what is the installed capacity of generating plant in Nigeria? We have about 22,000 megawatts. And what is the installed production capacity? We have about 18,000. Well, why is it that this 18,000 can't get to the home or this 22,000 can't get to the home? It becomes a case to figure. So for me to talk to the next administrations and for Nigeria to move forward, because that's the only way I said employment can be created.
Okay.
People can do that. Now, why is this power not getting to the homes and now that it becomes what we need to look into? These are a few reasons that you take about it. The installed capacity, over 6,000 of installed capacity are still suffering from gas supply. So the gas does not get to this power. So this power plant that have been fully installed cannot produce. So how do we make gas get to them? We have to revisit the relationship between gas and power. What is the gas purchase agreement, gas transportation agreement, gas processing plant we have, so that these people can have gas get to them. And if these gas are able to get to them at an affordable rate, then this plant will begin to produce. So that is one solution that people look at it. And you look at it from the other part again, that why is it that even when we have about 18,000 production capacity operate, meaning we can generate 18,000 megawatts, is a case that we don't have a transmission line that can wheel this 18,000 to our homes. Our transmission line is can comfortably do about 7,000 maximum. So why? For over 8 years, 10 years, so what needs to be done? So because of the transmission network we have, I will expect that we'll revisit that transmission network, and I will break it down into components, because what we have is too centralized. Powers are generated from different points, and they are transmitted to the NOC, which is located in Oshogbo, and before getting back to the various discos at home. In these processes, a lot of energy is wasted. There's lost accrued to it. And if you break it down into various components, I will recommend to them, break our transmission into maybe, to a start, break it into 4 or into even 2. Let's have the northern transmission and the southern transmission, so that power generator can revolve around. It doesn't have to do a long distance. It becomes a lesser cost to even build additional transmission network to support it, and that will easily work, because its ability. The next government need to focus on how to take this 18,000 to the homes.
So what about the discos, the way they complain about wastage? And
that is their basic problem. I'll get to that for you.
Okay.
Now, if this 18, remember I'm taking it from generation to transmission, I will get to this. I've told you the situation of our generation, so we need to do something. Anybody thinking, oh, we're not generating enough, it's not our problem yet. As far as we can generate and take it to the homes, we are good. Now, if this transmission is now improved, where you can generate, the transmission line can carry up to that 15,000, 20,000, our power will actually improve. If we are using just 5,000 or below 5,000, and we are where we are today, think about where you have additional 10 on top of it. So you should tell the multiplier effect. That will affect the industries. It will affect businesses. The productions. Capacity will improve. The man that will run his factory for 8 hours and off his generator will no longer off that generator. He will be able to run beyond and beyond that.
But are you still going to be stepping on some toes, especially those that import the generators?
They will change business. It's a natural phenomenon of life. Okay? Now, if this power is being, the ability to transmit this power is solved and it cannot get to the home. Now it's not the discourse to deal with. Now let me tell you one thing. Luckily, I was one of those advisors that participated deeply in power privatization. The disco owners were able to acquire those disco plants on one condition. On one condition. They were given, those were sold to them based on one condition. And what is that condition? They signed for it. And after taking it over, they're not paying attention to that. They're not doing it. And you want me to cry for you? Hell no. Government has been babysitting them. Enough is enough. Now, this is the condition they signed. They signed a condition that the ATC&C, aggregated technical commercial losses, they will reduce it to 0. They signed for it. And there was a template that they signed that says, in the next 1 year, I will reduce by 10%. Next year, I will reduce by 15% till I get it done. Hello, where are we?
So that's the complaint where they say that due diligence were not done at that privatization.
They signed for it. So if you cannot meet up of that, you hands off. That should be the rules. So you don't get halfway and now I will give you this power. You are now saying, oh, I have technical losses, I have collection losses, I have commercial losses. Hello, you signed that you are going to mitigate against collection losses. Is it me that will collect your revenue for you? No. Is it me that will avoid your commercial losses? No. People are tapping and bypassing. You should be creative on how to stop that. It's your business. You're losing revenue. So you signed that you're going to do this. We said that the NEPA, the PACN, we're not paying due diligence to do this, do this, this. You came as private sector. I'm going to stop it. Nobody will do this. I will introduce this signal meter. I was there. I was there. I remember the director of power in BP, Babagana. We had the meetings. So I have a copy of the agreement. So nobody is telling me that I don't know all this. So if government begin to be serious, if you're a disco and you sign for this and you're not achieving it, hands off. Today, you see the government always coming to bail out the discos. You know why they bail them out? That's a waste of money. And it should stop. The next government should stop. These are the leakages we should need to stop. We have to just put an end to it. The generation company will give you power worth 5 billion. See? The transmission will charge you 1 billion. So you're indebted to 6 billion as a disco. You come back at the end of the month. I did not collect 2 billion. No, I collected only 4, only 3. There, you can see it in the account. Who pays for the other one? You say government. Are you out of your mind?
So isn't that the typical Nigerian?
No, we should get that to the real business. We should put a benchmark. If you're a disco operator with this capacity, the moment you cannot pay the power supply to you up to this level, we take up you, will take you out. We'll take you out. It's as simple as that. And you now see them hurrying up to do that. And the worst part of it, they're not even making capital investment to expand power. I have even donated transformer to my communities. My maternal community and my paternal, I donated transformers. You know what happens? When you buy the transformer and call them to install, they install it and take it as their property and count it as part of their assets. No, let's be realistic about this. It can't work. So this chain, I'm taking one element that will help us generate employment, that will help the economy really grow. If I can have light 24/7, even if it's 12 hours, guaranteed, it means my production can last for 12 hours. And I no longer buy diesel at 900 naira. It means the cost of those goods will begin to come down. Indomie price will come down. Bread price will come down. Many things will just naturally. So in my own take, I think that area is very crucial. Okay. It is very, very crucial. And once that area is done, that employment, you see it naturally come. And the next area that will be also important is transportation. Is transportation. You know, there have been this issue of subsidy or no subsidy, remove subsidy or no remove subsidy. Ooh.
Because you just mentioned subsidy. Now, let's talk about subsidy, fuel subsidy removal. Since 1999 or so, correct me if I'm wrong, most administration, including the current one, aim to phase out the subsidies before their term, their tenure ends. But then there's always the fear of the negative consequences of that decision. And according to the finance minister, she said that during the presidential elections, the presidential candidate promised to remove fuel subsidy. But however, considering the current administration's safety, it has been suggested that the gradual removal of the fuel subsidy may commence in second quarter, June 2023. So by then we should be able to exit. But at some point we keep hearing something else. But then according to her, she said the good thing is that we hear that there's a consistent message that everybody is saying that this thing needs to go. That's the fuel subsidy, that it needs to go, and that it is not serving the majority of Nigerians. So personally, for you, fuel subsidy removal, to be or not to be? One question, that's one on the side. Secondly, you talked about the 800 million US dollar
from World Bank.
From World Bank they're supposed to be given to the most vulnerable Nigerians. Is that economically? Even sometimes we hear it is a grant or it is a loan. Does it even actually make any economic sense, be it a grant or a loan?
I try to be very honest to myself, because whatever I say and whatever I do has consequences on my generation and the generation after me. On the issue of fuel subsidy, I always have maintained my argument, and I maintain it. It's not going to change because I believe in it, and because also that outside God, the only other thing I believe is data. Data has shown me, I have put it in different economic models, I have published it as international paper, I have gone globally to speak about it and defend it as papers, publications. So there is nothing anybody can tell me. As of today, I even earn income from papers I've written on fuel subsidy. People download it online in the science journals and I get paid. So when I talk about it, I say it with honesty and order. Now, bringing it closer, the worst thing is to have fuel subsidy in existence because you are subsidizing the life of the rich, not the life of the poor. And I will explain.
How so?
I will explain it to you. An average rich person in Nigeria, even the new money, the young boys that just made money through new careers or this or IT, fintech, they want to buy one SUV, V8, V12, V6. Shey, it is their lifestyle that you are subsidizing. You're not subsidizing the lifestyle of the poor who goes to bus stop and look for taxi and look for a bus. Their fuel tank consumes 60, 100 liters of PMS. It is that PMS that you are subsidizing. It's not this. You see some of them have 4 cars, 8 cars in the house. You see a single man, he's going out, he's in 1 car, there is 8 cars at the back, escort car, 1 in the front, 1 at the back. And none of this car is less than V6. They are V6, V8, and V12 up. It is them that you are subsidizing. So who is being honest to each other? The data are clear and very obvious. Ordinarily, I would say, which I've recommended as in my thesis, in my submissions, you subsidize transportation. You don't subsidize the PMS. Because the government is, quote unquote, lazy to do data gathering. We have various transport companies in Nigeria, and these transport companies convey passengers, the vulnerable people. Even the luxurious car, the trailers, they have an association, they have a union. If you gather this into a transport database, and they exist, go to Peace Mass Transit, you can have record of the number of passengers Peace transports daily, weekly, monthly, and you can subsidize the price for their tickets. These big men that you subsidize their life, they don't go to those transports. They're not the vulnerables. They are not, and they can never be. They can afford their lifestyle. If you choose to buy those cars and PMS is this high price, I case you, pay for it. You understand what? So we need to deal with real economic data and justify what we are doing.
But won't it touch the vehicle that most vulnerable Nigerian wants to enter?
No, that's the transport you're not subsidizing. I'll give you a typical example. If, because of the cost of PMS, Peace charges 1,000 naira from Abuja here to Enugu, and you say you want to subsidize transport, you tell Peace, charge them 500, I pay the other 500. That's how you subsidize transport.
Oh, okay.
So that will make Peace come into the database of transport database. That will make Peace revenue to be known by federal government, and they can pay adequate tax. So you increase your tax base. And you can even go further to even say, those people that make use of that transport, if you want to enjoy government subsidy on transport, you must be a taxpayer. So automatically you are increasing the tax base of the nation, which means more revenue to the country, and you have removed that fuel subsidy.
So what happens to those big boys who is the V6?
Oh, they should afford the lifestyle.
Isn't that robbing Peter to pay Paul?
That is how economy is running all over the world. In America, the richest pay more tax to sustain the poor. Because if you don't provide for this poor, they will rob you, they will kill you. That is what is leading to Boko Haram and all the insurgencies, kidnapping and all that. The rich must pay for the survival of the poor. It's an economic model. You can't run away from it. If you don't, and as far as the rich keep walking away from it, the more they keep creating unsecure society. So to have a secure society, you must. And let me tell you one thing. We are analyzing this subsidy and transportation. And once you do this, you now begin to see, first, it is the government that will benefit. They will save money by removing it. Sure? They will also save money, make money by increasing their tax base. I can tell you, if you know the revenue of these transport companies, you will weep. But you know what? They are not within our tax base. They don't pay tax. So most of these things, you put it in such a way that it is obligatory, and once individuals knows what they benefit for obeying a government law, they do it more. It's like when you go to the Scandinavian nations like Finland and co. Voting is mandatory. To vote for election is mandatory. They do a 3 weeks voting period. Now, you know why? If you don't vote as an adult, you don't get government benefit. Let's say you're a student, you're not going to get educational funding, so you're mandated to vote. So they will begin to tie some responsibility to citizens and government. As of today, as you are, let me ask you, Annabelle, truly, does federal government owe you anything? They don't do anything for you. It's clearly. So we must get to the point where citizenship and government contracts exist. If I know that if I pay my tax and I have my tax paper, evidence of tax payer, one small card that is printed, I can go to a boss and get a reduced transport fee. I will do it. If I know as a father and I pay my tax, my children can take my tax record and apply for educational funding. They'll get funds to go to university.
But then that trust deficiency between the government and the governed,
it has to be established.
Hasn't it affected anything? Wouldn't it also affect this?
No. You gain it. Why it look like the trust is lost, that the people has given that trust and government did not give back. So now the onus is on the government to give the trust back.
Okay. So now you're saying that the $800 million it is a no-brainer?
If you ask me, if you give me $800 million today and says we want to remove subsidy and we want to use it for palliative, for relief pains, I will not share it. Clearly, I will not share it. I will not say, oh, get me 1 million Nigerians, I pay for 5,000. No, as an economist, I will not do that. I'll tell you what I will do different. Clearly, I will use that 1 million, that $800 million to provide transportations across the country. Clearly, that's what I will do. And those transportation I'm going to provide will not be on PMS. They will either be on CNG or they'll be on electric. That's what I will do. And think about it, with my 800 million, even if I decide to do a vehicle of $100,000, my 800 million will give me 80,000 vehicles. Distribute 80,000 CNG cars or electric cars in Nigeria. Clearly, we have 724 local governments.
Yeah, we still have issues of electricity.
Hold on. When I say electric car, my electric car could be serviced through solar. Okay, don't get it twisted. And I'll build a solar charging point with lithium batteries. We have lithium resources in our soil. I will take the value chain up so that you just don't understand that the lithium minerals will produce the battery and the solar panel will come from our sands in Nigeria. Even when I will start it, I may have to buy those batteries and the solar panel, but we'll now expand it.
But then you have Lagos already started.
Yeah, Lagos has already started. And we already have CNG cars in Nigeria. So when you combine that, so that you don't go back to PMS with that. And ordinarily, you'll be having at least 10 cars in each local government, doing interstate and interlocal government. And when you take that 10 times 774, you only have 7,700.
I was actually thinking you were going to talk about refineries. Since everybody talks about refineries.
This is, I'm giving you a solution where you inject it. And because if you put that funds in that way, cost of transportation will do what? Drop. Even all these transport owners, they'll begin to put some of their cars either in electricity or in CNG. and that brings out new technology. And then let me tell you, the moment you establish 10,000 cars with that $800 million in Nigeria road floating, I'll give you another example. 10,000 cars, you have created 20,000 jobs. The driver and the conductor, two.
All right.
It's so simple. It's just for us to take out of the bus and be very creative of what we want to do. Economically creative.
Economically creative. I think I've drawn that last word. Thank you so much, Dr. Nnachi. It's been a wonderful time having this discussion with you. Like, we could actually just go on and on, but then our time is fast spent. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, that's all we can take on this show. We have been chatting with Dr. Onuoha Nnachi. He is a financial analyst and he is an infrastructure economist. It's been a wonderful time. Like, we could just actually go on and on. Time never gives us enough time. Like they say, when you're discussing serious matters, the concerns are very own country, Nigeria. I will see you again. Keep watching The Conversation because you never know who my next guest will be and what I will be speaking of next. Till I come your way again from the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless you and yours, and God bless Nigeria.